Hi everybody, welcome to my channel. This is Miriam. I'll be hosting a giveaway here in a few minutes. I have everybody's names that wanted to participate right in here. So before I select a winner and do any book reading, I just wanted to pay tribute to a friend of mine. So I found out that he passed away last night. Sometime yesterday morning, I saw on his page that he had passed. I was in a lot of shock for a while because I got to know him at Phenomicon. He would be there every year. I'm gonna miss him being there. I've got to chat with him every year, gotten to know him. So prayers for his family and for his son Sheldon. Yeah, he's got a lot on him. So please pray for his family, everyone. I enjoyed the time I had with him, and whenever I came back from the petroglyph hike, I would show him the pictures, and he always enjoyed looking at the petroglyphs, the photos I took. Please keep his family in your prayers. And for anyone who doesn't know who Brent was, he's the podcaster. He was the podcaster from Paranormal Portal. And I always loved his podcast. He's going to be greatly missed. Please pray for his family. So the giveaway is this very lovely dragon tumbler made by Jess. So that's the first picture of it. It says dragon on it. It's a glow-in-the-dark tumbler. So that's the first picture. So that's the second side of it. Let's see the third side here. So that's what the other side of it looks like. Hey, Linda. So everybody that wanted to participate, their names are in here. So we'll see who's the lucky winner of this lovely dragon tumbler made by Jess. Oh, Kim Schilling, you won. Congratulations. So just message me later, Kim, and I'll get this glow-in-the-dark tumbler out in the mail to you. So congratulations. Okay, so I'll be reading a couple chapters of the book. It's called Skinwalker. It's really nice, really cool book by James McQuiston. So I hope you guys will enjoy. Chapter 4, Higher Energy. For all of its existence, humankind has been faced with mysterious phenomena. Often has been explained away as the actions of a god or goddess or of an evil spirit. Sometimes these activities are attributed to the spirits of the dead, to alien beings from another planet, and even to the demented minds of the witnesses. It is certainly true that some incidents can be explained by misidentification, fear, particularly at night, altered state of consciousness, drugs, alcohol, or self-induced trance, and purposeful misdirection by wanton humans bent on taking advantage of someone else, gaining their property, or scaring them for whatever reason. This chapter will be a slight diversion to some of the things that I have experienced, which at least for me and my family prove there is an invisible world where sights and sounds can be seen and heard, and electronic devices can be affected by unseen forces. as well to help support some of the strange events experienced on the ranch. The mysterious Skinwalker joins many other things that go bump in the night: the boogeyman, the werewolf, vampires, zombies, and of course, that thing that hides under my bed. It seems humans have always feared darkness, and in the case of the wolf, with good reason. It is estimated that there have been tens of thousands of deaths caused by wolves from the Middle Ages until today, although it is rare occurrence now. There were at least enough deaths to move this animal to the top of the fear list. There are no written records of wolf attacks prior to the European colonization of the Americas. However, the oral history of some native tribes confirm that wolves did kill humans. Those living in the forest feared wolves more than prairie-dwelling tribes, as they could encounter wolves suddenly and at close quarters, but both found the wolf of a challenge to face. The tales of American author Jack London and the real-life tales of many early trappers and miners on the western moving American frontier tell of wolves coming into camp to attack, typically at night. As with most legends, there is usually a ring of truth involved. Stories can be embellished or even entirely made up, but they are often based on actual events. I subscribe to a newspaper archive service that has billions of scanned news articles available as far back as the late 1600s, from the earliest newspapers in America up to today's papers. There is no mention of the word Skinwalker or Skinwalker until 1983 in the May 5th issue of El Paso Herald-Post. In an article titled "Magic Still Used on the Reservation," the author states that while researching on a Navajo reservation in Arizona, he was told by an engineering supervisor at a uranium mine that the Navajo wouldn't work in the night shift for an entire summer because of a Skinwalker was abroad in the valley. He was also advised that a Skinwalker wears a breechcloth and the pelt of a coyote over his head. He travels at night, hexing individuals for a fee. To see him is not a lucky experience. If charging a fee, it would seem the Skinwalker was a human in an animal disguise. In 1996, the second known article appeared in Naples Daily News by reporter Catherine Watson of Minneapolis-St. Paul Star-Tribune, and speaks of a visit to New Mexico. The author described the Skinwalker as a Navajo witch, a human being capable of transforming itself into other creatures. It goes out about at night fomenting evil. There are no good Skinwalkers. She mentions a local woodcarver artist who told her he'd seen a Skinwalker. About 2 a.m., when he was out one night with friends, a man appeared in headlights, a man with a red and white painted face and a coyote skin over his head. He was smiling, the man recalled. He was actually grinning. You could see his teeth. Later, she spoke with a middle-aged woman who, at the age of 17, had seen a Skinwalker. Her story was that she was driving along a road at night in New Mexico Navajo country. She still remembers how her headlights caught the strange figure on the side of the road, a wolf-like shape with a human face. Sounds fairly similar to the description given by the woodcarver. This woman stated that years later, a Navajo elder shook her hand and murmured, "Welcome, daughter. You have seen the walker. Do not be afraid." Note, the elder said the walker, not the Skinwalker. third oldest newspaper article was from 1998 in the October 9th issue of the Albuquerque Tribune, and spoke of a book by mystery writer Tony Hillerman titled Skinwalkers. It seems that it was about this time that the concept of the Skinwalker entered the consciousness of the average American audience, perhaps partly through the imaginative writings of this mystery novelist. Before Robert Bigelow purchased Skinwalker Ranch in 1996, it was never known as Skinwalker Ranch. It was most recently known as Sherman Ranch, named after Terry Sherman and his family. Sherman was the source for many of the wild stories that followed, as the family before him lived on the ranch for 60 years and denied that any mysterious phenomena of any kind occurred there, at least according to the Shermans. While the legend of the Skinwalker may have existed in the confines of Native American lore, its introduction to the general population is very recent, both in the form of books, articles, and the name of the ranch. We can explain away Idaho wolves traipsing into Utah and being impervious to a shotgun. We can identify the first owner of the ranch and suggest why he may have put a witch doctor's curse on it. And we can identify a man named Walker who was so terroristic that he could easily be the inspiration for the Skinwalker legend. But this still leaves UFO sightings, strange visions and voices, electronic signals, interference, plus things just generally going haywire. My own experience with this type of thing is that just as I was to send my first email to Brandon Fugel, something took over my computer. When I say took over, I mean the scroll bar just went crazy, sliding up and down with me having no control over it. I've owned this relic that I am writing this book on right now since 2007. It has never done any wacky thing like this before or since. I only did it when I was about to begin my own study of Skinwalker Ranch. Maybe it was coincidence, or maybe it was somebody or something telling me to back off and leave it all alone. I don't know, and I have no way of finding out. It just is. I spoke earlier of my many years of psychic studies. I have so many tales that would wig out the average person if it happened to them. I'll tell some here. What drew me to study the paranormal was when my father became seriously ill and was cured twice through alternative healing methods. He had been out hunting with his brother when his colon broke open. During the emergency surgery that followed, 6 spots of cancer were found on his liver. I was told that no one could live very long once cancer metastasized in the liver. Somehow the news did not bother me. Somehow I knew that this would not be the case, in this case at least, not for my father. Unknown to my siblings and me, my very Catholic mother had taken my father to a faith healer priest. On his next visit to the regional cancer center, my father's doctor entered the room laughing. My father lay in his bed dying of liver cancer, but had enough curiosity to ask, "Did you just hear a good joke?" "No," replied the doctor. "I have just witnessed a miracle." The doctor was the founder of the cancer center and had for 22 years seen all types of serious situations. What he had never seen in all that time were 6 spots of cancer on a 77-year-old man's liver right in the middle of metastasizing, completely disappear. "I've never seen anything like this in all my years, but all your cancer is gone," he told my father. My dad took the news in stride, as he had been through so much recently with his broken colon. He had been weak most of his life, but after 2 weeks of hunting on a mountain and 2 trips across that mountain in the same day, his colon had just given up. Had his colon not given up, there would have been no indication that cancer was working its way into his liver. Had it not given up, there would have been no visit to a faith-healing priest and all the miracles that had followed. Had it not given up, I would not likely have begun my studies of healing, meditation, intuition, past lives, and the paranormal. No explanation was ever found for the disappearance of my father's cancer, except that I, over the next several years, came to realize that there is a force that can beat the odds when called upon with intention and then released from our continual pleading so that it might do its job. Miracles would follow. My father became confused, no doubt from some of his medication and the terrible thought of dying. Over the next 2 years, every treatment in the book was thrown at him until his medical doctor, psychiatrist said, "I can help him, but not here at the hospital." A meeting was held at which the doctor explained that through a new type of electronic acupuncture, my father would easily be cured. Within 1 week, in fact, he was back to normal. After 10 treatments, he never returned again to that weakened mental state. And although he eventually passed over due to a stroke 7 years after the initial colon break, he had miraculously survived cancer and a mental collapse through alternative medical healing practices. On the day of my father's funeral, which happened 7 years later, a chime clock in my mother's sitting room decided to stop chiming. 2 years later, on the very anniversary of his death, my mother, my 4 siblings, and I sat at our cold kitchen table speaking of my father, when out of the blue the clock began to chime. My mother smiled, such a big smile, and reminded us that she had taken that clock to 2 different repair shops and no one could get it to chime. It had remained on her stereo cabinet silently for 2 years, and now, with all 6 of us sitting around the dinner table talking, Dad literally decided to chime in. Was this a case of a departed dear one signaling to his family through a low-voltage chime clock? We think so. What else explains it? About that time, I had made arrangements to visit a spiritualist community, and as I drove onto the grounds, I passed an ordinary-looking house. I knew right then and there that this, where a reading had already been scheduled for me. I don't know how I knew, I just did. The reading itself did not seem to be anything special, but the fact that I predicted where it would be held was certainly amazing to me. While strolling the grounds after my reading, I picked up a brochure for a weekend class on mediumship. I was struck by the fact that the advertisement referred to mediumship as a form of alternative healing based in Judeo-Christian foundations. With my father's 2 alternative healings fresh in my mind, I decided I would take the relatively inexpensive weekend class. I felt that if I did, in fact, learn the secrets of mediumship, it would be well worth the cost. If I learned instead that it was a charade or simply didn't work at all, I would at least have that question answered for my inquisitive mind. The bottom line is that it did work. Within 1 day, I was already giving short, accurate readings. I continued with classes for 4 years until I graduated as a medium and a metaphysician. Even after 4 years of formal study, I continued over the next 8 years to attend 1 or 2 refresher courses each year. In all, I've given 300 more readings, a couple of which I will repeat in this book. The phenomenon is real. It can have real life-changing results. It can heal the medium, and it can heal the client. And it can and has literally changed the world for me, for so many of my clients and fellow classmates. The pertinent bit of information from this book is that readings often involve seeing the unseen and hearing the unspoken. Yep, Kim, you won. Congratulations. I see the chat. In 1998, I found myself alone, my children gone to college, and my ex-wife moving on as well. From 1998 until early 2000, I spent an inordinate amount of time in seclusion, reading, thinking, praying, and traveling. I also made a few trips to North Carolina to visit with my niece and her husband. I traveled to California and Oregon. Yes, I hugged a redwood tree, and I made 2 trips to Scotland to study family history. On my second trip to Scotland in 2000, I felt myself change very deeply inside. I knew that I was healing and it was now time to learn. I had been continuing my trips to the spiritualist community and made several more in the summer of 2000, signing up for the medium class that year. By that summer, I had also shown my house to absolutely no one, in spite of 2 years of attempting to sell it using 2 different realtors. The memories bounce off the walls. Any little noise would scare me as I constantly played Mr. Fix-It, trying to make the house more appealing. I threw away or gave away anything I couldn't immediately sell or use. The house became an analogy, or how I felt inside empty. I had a chance to rent a beautiful place on Lake Erie, nearer to my job, but I needed to sell my house by the 1st of August in order to make the move. In July, I found myself on the phone with my niece. After some casual talk, she said, "You've been honoring our ancestor for so long by studying our family history. Why don't you ask them to help you sell the house?" We laughed a little over this, but as I hung up, I said, "Okay, you guys, she's right. I've been honoring you for a long time now, and all I am asking you for is this one favor. Please help me sell the house." That was Friday night. Saturday morning, about 10 a.m., the real estate agent called to say, "I think I have your house sold." I was stunned. He went on to explain that a couple who had never even seen the inside had called the very morning to say they wanted my house. They bought it, and I moved to the lake by the beginning of August 2000. A few months later, I was back in my hometown for the day and ran into an old high school buddy of mine. He worked with the man who purchased my home. My friend said the buyer had told him that he didn't know why, but God had told him to buy my house. With chime clocks chiming, miraculous healings, and unexplainable house sales, how could I not believe that there is some kind of power that can affect our lives? The following is an example reading I was involved with. Her name was Eleanor. The grandmother, that is, the deceased grandmother, I was a student at my test. And my test that day was to find the name of someone who had passed over and who was significant to a fellow student or client. A client had been paired with, by the luck of the draw, a client I knew nothing about except that she had this curious, almost annoying habit of holding her hand over her mouth before beginning a sentence, and she would often begin that sentence several times. For those of us in class who had only just met her, the month before. The habit was becoming as distraction as we debriefed our lives since last we met and made general comments about the class. Our specific instructions for this lesson were to get a name and get something that would help the person we were reading. My quest became obvious from the beginning. I would get something that would help her with her speaking problem. We retired to a corner and immediately the name Eleanor came to my mind. Well, I say immediately, but that needs qualification. Though a beginner at the time, my style was to say a short prayer and that I had been taught, and then while listening somewhere near my right ear, I would silently say, just tell her him. And then I would repeat anything that came to my mouth. I say my mouth because it never made it to my brain. In this case, I asked who was Eleanor. Well, Eleanor was the grandmother of my client, had raised my client, and was, in fact, perhaps the most significant person in her life, and Eleanor was passed over. So I had completed step one of my assignment, identify a departed person by name who was significant to the client. Woo, that was easy. I went back to Eleanor and said in my inner voice, okay, your granddaughter has this habit of speaking which drives people crazy. What's going on? Eleanor actually showed me the woman hitting a solid object as a young girl while riding her bicycle. My client confirmed that she had hit a solid object, a car, and as she hit the car, the handlebar grip came loose. The metal handlebar tip smacked her right in the mouth. She was forced to wear a bandage on her mouth for a few months, and also felt like she was experiencing lockjaw at times, though no one seemed to believe her. Well, it was pretty obvious why Now had her bad habit, and I told her honestly that I had asked Eleanor to help her with that very problem. She was very excited as it had been worrying her lately since she was about to begin teaching a college-level course in acting, of all things, and was wondering how she was going to deal with this issue. I went back to Eleanor and asked what should she do about this problem. I was shown how she should simply link or fold her fingers together and place her hand in her lap before speaking. This was the second time in this reading where I saw something that wasn't actually there, or was it? A month went by and we were again, about 24 students debriefing their lives over the last 30 days. I watched and waited for my client's turn to speak. When her name was called, she calmly placed her hands folded together in her lap and spoke right out without a single problem. As we headed out of the room for our first break, I sat waiting for her to pass me. When she did, I said I saw what I wanted to see. She replied, I know, isn't it great? Maharishi Maha Yogi is famous for creating transcendental meditation and for leading the Beatles to Eastern religion and meditation, affecting not only their beliefs but also their music. One Beatles song, The Inner Light, tells of their beliefs from that time. Without going out of my door, I can know all things of earth. Without looking out my window, I could know the ways of heaven. The farther one travels, the less one knows, the less one really knows. Arrive without traveling, see all without looking, do all without doing. It's obvious that even the Beatles, who had seen the world had everything a person could want, found solace in meditation and had an apparent belief in intuition and psychic ability. One former Beatles band member, Paul McCartney, one of the richest men in the show business, stated in a recent interview that he still meditates every day. Oprah Winfrey, Larry King, and other TV personalities have also had psychics on their shows. No one can doubt that these people had it all as well, and yet they too like the Beatles and so many others highly successful people, have developed a keen interest in what would be considered paranormal phenomena. From U.S. President Lincoln, Roosevelt, Kennedy, possibly Nixon, definitely Reagan, were known to consult psychics, and if the truth were known, many successful people have and still do. In this book, I try to write about all this phenomena from a common sense point of view while relaying my own incredible experiences. There is another facet to my studies and writings, and that is the phenomena of healing. I take the same introspective view of this, and I consider it to be part and parcel with intuition and meditation. My classmates during my first 4 years of formal training included a medical doctor, several psychologists, the chairman of the board for the Visiting Nurses Association of America, several human resource folks, teachers, nurses, the list goes on. I can honestly tell you that I have seen many healings, including one woman freed from cancer. I have given readings that have changed people's lives. I have been so deep in meditation that I believe I've finally understood what universal energy is, at least for me. But how can we know for sure because we can't see energy? Let's say you moved an apple across the table to a point where there was no more table. It would most likely fall to the ground unless something else stood in the way. We know it is gravity making this happen, but we can't see gravity, only its results. When we plug our hairdryer into the wall and flip the switch, it turns on. We know electricity is flowing through it, but we can't see it, only its results. If we threw the plugged-in hairdryer in a bathtub full of water, we'd really see some results. When we diet or exercise, we burn calories though we can't see the process, only the results of, hopefully. When we love someone, we can't see the love, only the results, as we do something special just for that person or think of them often or see them smile. The list of examples is long. Inerta lasers, which only show on the object they land on, but are invisible until that point. Electrical power, can't see it, but certainly feel its results. In fact, any emotional energy, any mechanical energy, any natural energy is invisible. Energy is invisible, period. And so we see the manifestation of energy all the time in miracles of life, modern inventions, the vastness of the universe, and the complexity of the miniature world of atoms. We just don't see the actual energy. This list can also go on, and while we have no trouble believing in gravity, electricity, burning calories, or love, many have trouble believing in a higher energy that drives the universe. We also see results of spiritual healing, mediumship, and meditation, and yet just look at all the detractors of these subjects. We simply need to look at the results to know that these are as real as the rest. Same is true for Skinwalker Ranch. There have been many odd measurements of erratic energy recorded with no explanation as to what is causing them. This doesn't mean there is no solution, just that the solution hasn't been found or proven yet. This reminds me of another reading I once gave. I was working out of the basement of a health food store in order to fulfill my class assignment. When I say basement, I mean I had a little dark corner in a stone basement of a 100-year-old building. Cordons off by a curtain and two simple chairs and a lamp, a place too unnecessarily mystical for my taste. I just recently finished reading Psychics of the Soul by Amit Goswami, a book I highly recommend. My next client was a male about 35 years of age. As he sat down, he gave the obvious indication that he was a skeptic by folding his arms and legs, sitting slightly sideways. As unnerving as giving readings can be in a normal, if there is such a thing, setting, these These leg and arm crossers sorely challenged the faint of heart. As confidently as I could, I closed my eyes, said my prayer and my little forced intro of just tell him, which point I typically begin to ramble, words that may mean much to my client, even if I do not understand what they are meant for. In this case, I immediately began talking about the book I had just read. I touched on some of it, more extreme theories of all, while thinking I was whimpering out on this guy and wondering where my story was going. After 15 minutes or so, I ran out of interesting things to repeat, and so I closed with the thought that many psychists, physicists, and physics teachers at schools are reluctant to tell what they know about higher energy for fear of being ridiculed or even worse, losing their job. When I finished, he totally opened up his limbs and his voice said, "You are exactly right. I'm the local physics teacher in this town. I have to keep my mouth shut about so much or I'll lose my job." Here I thought I was failing the client when, in fact, I was telling him just what he needed to hear, just what he had come there in that night to discover. He said he was going to get the Goswami book for sure and thanked me kindly. These and many more unbelievable readings assure me that some type of force is out there just reading, ready to take charge of the situation. One of the important things to note is that the intention of the person experiencing this force has a lot to do with the results. If the intention is for something good to come about, it just might. If the intention is based in fear or misunderstanding, something terrible might happen, like a whacked out electronic device, a run in with extreme negativity, or even the sighting of the Skinwalker. Could a resident or a researcher on Skinwalker Ranch have a psychic experience where they see the unseen or hear the unspoken? Of course they could. It happens all the time. It happened to me, totally unsuspecting and totally uneducated in the process. When I saw myself getting that first reading in that little house in the spiritualist community 22 or more years ago. My short departure from the Skinwalker story has shown us a number of things. First, a human can be affected by electrical impulses. In turn, electrical objects can be affected by invisible forces or energies. This seems to be one of the more common experiences on Skinwalker Ranch, from faltering smartphones and electrical measuring devices to certain portal-type locations that seem to affect mental or physical health of a person. When a psychic is affected through feelings, it is called clairscience, which is very much akin to empathy, gut feelings, mother's intuition, or street smarts. Even when intentions are set for the good of the client, this can be a most disturbing experience for the medium as they tend to take on the emotions, often very sad, of the client, even to the point of breaking down into tears or feeling great exhaustion. If some type of bad vibes are felt by researchers on Skinwalker Ranch, this could be the exact same thing that happens to a medium, negative energies from the unseen affecting the well-being of a person who is simply trying to help discover answers. If it happens in one setting, why not in the other? Second, we know a person can hear disembodied voices or see glimpses of unidentified beings. This has happened to me and to other psychics as well as so-called normal people innumerable times. In fact, a good share of my readings involve seeing a figure almost as in a dream with my eyes closed or wide open. Doesn't seem to matter. It turns out to be important to my client. This is called clairvoyance. This is a less traumatic way of reading, but to someone not expecting it while out on a ranch in Utah, the terror could still scare the hell out of them. And the images of clairvoyance are generally fleeting, and this is also a common description given of sightings on Skinwalker Ranch and other sightings of skinwalkers elsewhere, as well as UFOs with other strange beings. There have been many tales told throughout history of someone seeing a loved one who is far away and going through the process of dying in some types of accident or war situation. I had a similar experience, although it was more in the nature of clear science rather than seeing the actual person. Several years back, I had the good fortune of meeting a man very significant in the return of the Bay of Pigs prisoners from Cuba. I learned a great deal from him about him, and we exchanged emails for a few years. I often wished I could write a book about his experiences for the world to read. One night, November 4th, 2016, I was fast asleep when in the middle of the night I woke to the thought I should email this man again. I checked his law firm website in Washington, D.C., and there was his email address. Satisfied, I decided I'd email him in the morning. That morning I logged on again to the website to retrieve his email and was met with a notice that he had died in the middle of the night. Here was a case where I wasn't intending for any psychic phenomena to happen, it just did. And like the unsuspecting researchers on Skinwalker Ranch, it shook me to the core. It still does as I tell the story. This is also a case where obvious some invisible or higher energy affected me without my foreknowledge or consent. The third type of mediumship is clairaudience, or the hearing of something or someone when no one is obviously near enough to speak or make a noise. This is my favorite method because, as I explained earlier, I simply say somewhere near my right ear in a silent voice, just tell him, her, and then I begin saying whatever pops into my mind. This method has worked wonders for me, and I've taught it to a few other mediums as well. No matter what tools or ceremonies are used by mediums and prophets, the true energy behind their success is their intention married with a lack of attention. In other words, you decide you are going to give a reading for the good of the client, then you use a method to take your attention off yourself, off your own ego and the trouble of the world, and just let fly. We were taught not to try. We were told that the successful experience of meditation and mediumship is like a butterfly. If you chase after it, you won't likely catch it. If you sit still and seem disinterested, it may just land on your finger. Many methods of creating a so-called trance have been used, from crystals to a bowl of water, from tea leaves to gazing at a point of light. It doesn't matter what method is used, the goal is simply to get readers to mind off the reading or the prophecy and just let the butterfly land if it wants it to. On Skinwalker Ranch, we have heard many times of a rancher or researcher just going about their daily business when their personal paranormal event happened. I believe it is the exact same effect. Chapter 5: Unseen Influences. Now that you've heard my best stories, whether you decide to believe them or not is your choice. But here are some strange tales having nothing to do with me or my involvement in them. For many years, the military has used sound as a weapon, at least as far back as the Battle of Jericho, beginning on April 20th, 1400 BC. Loud trumpets were used in some supposed manner to help conquer the city. No doubt this wasn't new to battles, as some Egyptian hieroglyphics show trumpets being played. 2 trumpets were found in King Tut's tomb that still exist. Also, Celtic warriors were famous for their battle cry and other unearthly sounds designed to scare the enemy. The final component of the famous Highland charge was the screaming of a battle cry shortly before engaging the enemy in hand-to-hand combat. Also, the Scottish bagpipe is the only instrument ever outlawed as a weapon of war, and it was escorted by loud drums. In more modern days, we've heard stories of how the military would set up loudspeakers aimed at the enemy's defensive position and at very high volume blast either very low frequency sounds, obnoxious music, or the repetition of one song for days at a time. All these methods over the years were meant to affect both psychology and physiology of the enemy. More recently, a new and very scary phenomenon has been reported. Havana syndrome is an alleged set of medical symptoms with unknown causes, experienced mostly overseas by the U.S. government, officials, and military personnel. The symptoms range in severity from pain, ringing in the ears, to cognitive difficulties, and was first reported in 2016 by U.S. and Canadian embassy staff in Havana, Cuba. The U.S. Department of State has referred to the events as unexplained health incidents, while Central Intelligence Agency Director William Burns publicly called them attacks. While there is no expert consensus on the syndrome's cause, an expert committee of the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine concluded in December 2020 that microwave energy appears to be the most plausible mechanism in explaining these cases, among those that the committee considered, but that each possible cause remains speculative. One of the alleged suspects for these strange attacks is the Russian government, who was upset that America was trying to open up better relations with Cuba. Beginning in 2017, more people, including U.S. intelligence and military personnel and their families, reported having these symptoms in other places such as China, New Delhi, India, Europe, and Washington, D.C. The cause and validity of the illness have yet to be determined. Neurosurgeon Dr. Sanjay Gupta has postulated that the mind could be the battlefield of the future. Perhaps the battles have already been unexpectedly taking place in people's minds due to unseen influences, principally through wavelengths naturally or humanly generated. Many years ago, some well-meaning scientists decided that we only use 10% of our brain. You may have heard this yourself and wondered, well, how can I use the rest, or worse? Why am I so terrible, inefficient with my brain power? Turns out we use all of our brain. These scientists were recognizing only the parts of the brain that can actually be measured as firing when we perform some mental function. These parts are called nerve cells or neurons. But is now thought that much of the balance of brain matter is where our consciousness actually lives, where problems are solved and emotions are felt, etc. This area is called the glia, and it is connector, the protector, and nourishment of the nerve cells. Just like sound and light waves, our brain activity can also be measured in wavelengths. In meditation hypnosis lingo, we often hear of going deeper or downward to relax and yet raising our vibration. These are the first seem like contradictory terms, but if you think of our consciousness as a wavelength, the more you compress it. By going deeper or downward, the higher vibration level the wavelengths will need to be achieved in order to get to pass the same or equal amount of energy through our glia. While normal consciousness is measured at about 40 wavelengths per second, meditating monks have been measured as upwards of 80 to 90 wavelengths per second as they go deeper into meditation. We're all about wavelengths. There are light waves and sound waves, X-ray waves, radio and television waves, microwaves, and many other wavelengths on a continuous spectrum, most of which we cannot comprehend with our five senses. We certainly can't see X-rays though we can see the results, or at least our doctor can. We also know too many of them can be harmful to us. We can't see laser light wavelengths until they land on a wall, on smoke in the air, or on some object that reflects them. And yet we can see them cut through hard metal objects easily. They can also blind a person or burn their skin if used incorrectly. We can't see a radio or TV wave frequency, and yet we can hear and see the results of them. We adjust our sight and sound wavelengths, or at least their focus, all the time when we try to pick out a sound from far away, like a train whistle, or when we try to focus on a single tree rather than the whole forest. It is possible then for us to adjust our own personal wavelengths. We often speak of being on another person's wavelength. This isn't just hyperbole. Counselors, psychiatrists, or even salespeople are taught to mimic our breathing speed or sitting positive in the tone and speed of our voices, all to get on our wavelength, in order to feel in tune with us, and even to predict how we are feeling or what we are thinking. I once watched a 60-minute TV report showing scientists who had proven that all average human brains experience the same neurotransmitters firing when viewing the same object. When a typical human looks at the drawing of a hammer, the same exact area of their brain fires or has an electrical charge travel through it. These scientists took 100 drawings of 100 separate objects. They would ask an MRI subject to pick 10 of them and think of only of those 10 during the MRI. The brain of every single test subject could be read by the MRI machine, based on which 10 objects they thought of and the corresponding firing of brain cells. Even Leslie Stahl, a longtime well-respected CBS reporter, submitted herself to the test, and the scientist picked all 10 items that she was thinking of. She reported that there were actually 2 companies doing test marketing, showing new items to an MRI client and the recording of if pleasurable or non-pleasurable brain cells were being stimulated. One of the customers buying the technology in a famous fast food restaurant looking for a new food product to sell. This MRI study is elementary, but what if the psychic is simply so sensitive to their client that when the client thinks of something, the psychic gets a similar hit of something to speak back to the client? This could explain the vast majority of the accurate readings. In other words, that the client is bringing and reading the reading with him or her. This presents the possibility that our brains are much like the open architecture of computer software, in which once the path in is discovered, anything can happen. So taken all together, we've seen how significant the role of wavelengths on our consciousness can be, just in our normal daily lives, for good and for bad. However, it goes much deeper. If consciousness is a wavelength, or at least measured by one, all the evidence seems to indicate that it is. There must be a minimal depth we could compress it to while we go deeper into meditation or hypnosis, and thereby a maximum speed at which this wavelength could oscillate as we raise our own vibrations and still be considered a vibration or a wave and not a straight line. The ideal minimal wave and maximum speed is called the Planck level, named after Max Planck, a German physicist who won the Nobel Prize in 1918 for his work on the relatively new science of quantum physics. It is at our near Planck level where scientists come into contact with the world of quantum physics. Many in the meditation and hypnosis fields believe this is also the place where we come into close contact with a higher energy or our deepest being. The theory is that while we could never actually achieve Planck level and live to tell about it, the closer we get to it, the more we reach all levels of our consciousness. It is at the quantum level where experiments seem to indicate that the scientist can control outcomes of a test through his or her observation. As far back as the 1920s, the scientists Albert Einstein and Niels Bohr were debating the idea that humans actually create reality through observation, and that a system can be seen either as a wave or as matter depending on how it is viewed. If this is the case, could it be that sightings of strange creatures or crafts are simply the result of the nature of observation of them by the viewer, and that in reality they are actually made up of what Bohr called wave particles? And so, do we create our own reality? I spent a good share of my print and publishing career as a color expert, working for large corporations and fashion catalogs. In spite of about 1 million colors humans can see, I know what our vision only covers a very small part of known wavelengths. Many scientists and metaphysicians have studied the effect of color wavelengths can have on a person. You've likely heard of prisoners being made to wear pink uniforms in order to keep them calm, and of red being the favorite color for advertisement. Yes, we can be affected by something as simple as color wavelengths. Red is one of the most favorite colors for humans to see. Think of sunsets and roses like red Corvettes and luscious red lips. When there's the candied apple, the valentine, the peppermint stick, the sunset, and old telephone booths. The reason why seems to be that in the nature there is not a lot of red to see on a daily basis. We mostly see deep greens and browns, which are sometimes considered boring colors, simply because we see them so often. If we're lucky, we see blue water or blue skies, which tend to take us out of our earthbound state, perhaps with dreams of sailing the world or even spaceflight. But red? People almost always seem to see it in something rare and beautiful. As the color wavelength, some sound waves can relax one person and drive another person crazy. In music, a major chord generally brings about a happy or normal feeling, whereas a minor chord brings about a moody, sad, or mysterious feeling. Often just one note makes all the difference. If simply seeing a beautiful red sunset or listening to a stirring orchestra can create awe in a person, just think what an ill-intended or dangerous wavelength can do. Hidden wavelengths on Skinwalker Ranch could be easily affecting people in strange ways, whether they are generated by hidden sound, sights, microwaves, radiation, or some as yet undiscovered source of energy. The following graphic shows how all wavelengths inhabit in the same basic spectrum, but how most of them are undetectable without special equipment, and many of them are harmful to us. So he's pretty much showing a graph about electromagnetic spectrum, radio waves, microwaves, infrared, ultraviolet, X-rays, and gamma rays, and the visible spectrum. Of all these waves, mostly undetectable by our five senses, the most dangerous waves to humans are microwaves, suspected in Havana syndrome. Gamma rays, which are the most dangerous result of atomic explosions, and to some degree X-rays. There are other documented cases of situations like Havana syndrome in the form of unseen influences affecting a person's health, such as mechanical vibrations in a building or even an air conditioner in a neighbor's building. Notice I said mechanical because there is a whole another area of unseen influences or energy spoken of in a metaphysical world that include psychochemistry, where energies left behind by a previous owner can allegedly be detected in objects like jewelry or hand tools, clothing, or in a physical object once possessed by the departed owner of the object. A similar situation is when a building is said to contain good or bad energy, or in more negative terms, to be haunted. Extremely significant, a Canadian neuroscientist, Dr. Michael Persinger, has demonstrated that the trained application of varying electromagnetic fields to the temporal lobes of the brain can produce haunting experiences such as perception of a presence, a feeling of God, or a sensation of being touched. It has been noted that areas most associated with hauntings do also possess erratic magnetic fields. After all my studies in the world of metaphysical, I can't say for certain what is happening. I suspect unseen energies that are capable of affecting people, but are sometimes too fleeting to be consistently measurable. I suspect most human minds are wired in a way that allows for some level of telepathic communication. I also suspect that the universe consists of massive chaos, that soul energies and solar systems coalesce, coalesce out of a survival instinct, or possibly even through observation. So that was part of chapter 5 of the book Skinwalker. Hope you guys enjoyed the book. I'm going to be going to a movie, the Disclosure, Age of Disclosure movie. So I'm going to be seeing how it is. So have a good night, guys, and congratulations to Kim on the Dragon Tumblr. Just message me your address and I'll get it out to you. Have a good night, everybody.